What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journos, Comics, and Pop Culture. Today, we are doing a video looking at the best Bronze Age key to invest in right now for 2022. For those that have been around my channel for a while, you may remember a year ago I did a very similar video. That's right, we are taking the information and the data that I did for that video, and we are reworking it to see what 1 year has done for these blue chip Bronze Age keys. For those of you that aren't subscribed to the channel, please take the time to do so. Check out all the links in the description below as well, including the link to today's sponsor, popculturezone.com. I'll be doing a little 60-second clip to tell you a little bit more about them later on in the video. And I also want to remind you guys that if you're in need of comic book supplies, please check out bcwsupplies.com. You can use the code JOURNOS to receive 10% off of your order. This code never expires. You can use it as many times as you want. All right, so like I said, we looked at these 4 books 1 year ago. We're going to be looking at what the numbers were doing back then. We're going to be looking at what the numbers are doing right now. And we're going to look at all these factors and ask ourselves, what is the best out of all of them to invest in right now? And we're going to look at it a few different ways, and I will explain on the way, but let's just go in to looking at the first book. First up, we have Werewolf by Night 32. Now, what we're looking at right here are the numbers from 1 year ago, back in 2021. Of course, this is the first appearance of Moon Knight. Back then, the high 9.8 sale was for $31,200, and that was back in March of 2020. A high raw sold for $25.50 back in March of 2021. Now let's see how or if that has changed over the last year. And look at this. We still have that high 9.8 sale of $31,200 back in March of 2020. So we have not had another record-breaking sale for a 9.8, but we do have a high raw of $7,100 1 year later in March of 2022. So if you look back again, that's a huge jump. I mean, that's close to triple, not quite, but close to triple of what it did a year before. Look at that, 7,100 from 25.50. Now, the thing to remember about this book and this character is, what did we get? We got a Moon Knight show earlier in the year. So you have to ask yourself, did that affect this book? And I mean, the obvious answer is yes. And how you want to look at that is up to you, but it absolutely affected this book. All right, so what I'd like to do is break this down for you all. So take some notes if need be. We're going to look at all these books as well in a CGC 8.5. So let's look at top left of the screen here. What do we have? This is a graph showing you the value of the book over the last about 5 years or so here. And while you see it peaking early in 2022, you see that the last couple of sales have dropped back down again. So ultimately, I think this peak absolutely has to do with the TV show. That was right around the time where we probably got the trailers right before the show came out. Another thing that we're going to look at to the top right, we're going to look at annual ROR, rate of return, which means it's basically what your return on investment is year after year. Okay, so if you go into a calendar year, if a certain book is worth $1,000 and at the end of that year it's worth $1,200, you had a positive rate of return of 20%, right? But then you go into that next year, and if it's $1,200 at the start of the year and it goes up to $1,500, then it's another percentage between what's 300 and 1,200, right? So as you can see here, going way back to 2014, Werewolf by Night 32 has increased in value every single year from the year before. Even here in 2020, 1%, well, a little bit. And again, this is all based on averages, folks. So we have a projected increase based on a 34% annual ROR, which is what you do if you add these all up and divide them and get that average. So on average, Werewolf by Night has increased 34% year after year. And if it stays on the same trajectory, what is a valued book of roughly right here, if you look to the bottom right, 22 fair market value is sitting at about $3,845. If it stays on the same trajectory, it's by 2029, this book is going to be sitting around the $12,000 mark. And look at this. We're going back 10 years. 10 years ago, the fair market value for a CGC 8.5 Werewolf by Night 32 was only worth $222. Now, total ROI in dollar amount, what's your return on investment? If you would have bought this book 10 years ago and sold it for the fair market value that's sitting today, you would have made $3,623. That is a return on investment in percentage of 1,632%. That is absolutely nuts. But here's the thing, folks. When we look at, the projected value and we look at ROR, as you can see, it doesn't always stay the same. It's an average, right? So we see this big jump, and we're going to see a trend in these other books in 2021. And a lot of that had to do with the market. Now, let's look at this 2022 bump of 31%. That's still large. Well, you had a TV show pushing this book up too. So, do we think that this book is going to continue on this trajectory? That's where the big question mark comes in, right? All right, but we're going to move on and look at the next book. So next up, we have Giant Size X-Men #1. Obviously, the first appearance of the new X-Men team. The first appearance of Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus. In 2021, the CGC 9.8 high sale was $40,500, and that hit in February of 2021, with the high raw sale hitting just a month later last year for $7,322. Let's look at anything has changed this year. Well, we did. We got a high raw of $72,000 back in June 2021. All right, but that high raw, no sale beat that high raw way back in March of 2021 for that $7,322. Obviously, no higher sales have hit this calendar year as well. So that high 9.8 peaked kind of around that, that market peak as well. But look, man, I mean, that's a huge, that's like what, an 85 to 90% increase from that 40,000 high just a few months before. So that's an outlier if you ask me. Now let's look at the data. We're going to look at this chart for, again, CGC 8.5, and you could see, similar to the 9.8s, this book in an 8.5 peaked kind of in the summer of 2021 with a sale that hit close to 9,000. But look at this. Earlier this year, you had another sale that peaked over 8,000. So while this is kind of an outlier, because you see a lot of them selling in between like that $6,000 to $7,000 mark, one of the more recent sales peaked over that 8,000 as well. So you look at the state of the market. Well, the comic book market was already trending down because it peaked at this COVID high. And now with the state of the economy, things are coming down. Well, yeah, the last sale that looked like around 7,000, but I mean, hey, it's still trending up there. And if you look at what this has done year after year in terms of rate of return, in 2015, you had a fair market value average that was less than the year before, but every other year it had a bump up. And again, you're probably going to see this trend. Every book in 2021, that's 120, it more than doubled, 121%. This book on average more than doubled in 2021. And right now, in 2022, we got a 12% bump. So still, it's not dropping below the 2021 average. You see what I'm saying? Even though you may have had a couple of outlier peaks in 2021, the average is still rolling higher than 2021. And again, if you could look at projected numbers here and compare it to the fair market values over here, right now 2022 fair market value is sitting at about 6,771. If we look at the trajectory going into 2029, This book has a trajectory of $20,000. For me, folks, that's kind of unbelievable. And you got to look at one factor. Again, this year's rate of return, which you can look at as an outlier in and of itself. I mean, if you took all of these percentages, from, the 20 to 40% every year, you had a 62% uh, increase in 2019. 2019, by the way, was a very solid year for books pre COVID. If you take this one out, this trajectory changes. It's not going to be up that high. So again, I'll be doing this video a year out from now, and we'll see if maybe 2023 looks a little more like, like this instead of like that. And it is going to bring that projected increase down some. We shall see. But let's look at return on investment. If you purchased this book back in 2012, you probably purchased around fair market value, $625. If you sold it today, your profit roughly would be somewhere around $6,146. That is a 983% increase in value. So again, over the last 10 years, comic books have been soaring for the most part. It's nuts, right? All right, folks, the next book we are going to look at is Amazing Spider-Man number 129, my holy grail, one of them. First appearance of the Punisher. What was this book doing as of 2021? Well, a high 9.8 sale. That happened way back in 2018. Crazy, right? $16,730. Now, you got to understand with Bronze Age books, 9.8s don't come onto the market every day or even every week, and that often, they are more scarce. So take that into consideration. You did have a high raw sell for almost 5,000 at 4,950 in February of 2021. Well, has anything changed since then? Absolutely. Now, this is still summer of 2021 numbers, nothing in 2022, but since then, we have this book in a 9.8 more than double to a 40,800 sale in July of 2021. A little bit of an outlier. Well, that could be an understatement. Again, understanding what the market was doing at that point in time. We had a high raw of $8,101 in June of 2021, right around that peak. So again, in 9.8, nothing beat those summer 2021 prices as of yet. So let's look at the charts. All right. If you look at what this is doing, though, we had peaks in 9.8s, right? But look at this. Over the last few months, in an 8.5, the book has been holding. And it looks like the highest sale came at least in this year. It doesn't have an exact date, but this is 2022, right around here. So very interesting that this book has held. And again, if you take into consideration the averages, you got this outlier of a rate of return from the next because of 2021. But in 2022, this book is still averaging higher than 2021. And again, I want to let you folks know the reason why I used 8.5s as the grade to gauge the actual data here is two things. One, there's a lot more 8.5s on the markets being sold week to week, right, than 9.8. Secondly, on top of the market just booming over the last year and a half, the 9.8 market is in and of itself its own outlier. The 9.8 market has gone crazy just because it's 9.8. So it wouldn't be a fair gauge. And I want you all to really understand and know that, all right? Now, if we look at the projection, this book sitting right now, if we look at the fair market value at $3,359, 2029, this book could be hitting close to $9,000 in fair market value. This is a little more, I would think this is a little more believable. But again, you have this huge outlier. I think the trajectory of this book, ironic, I don't say this a lot. You guys know that if you watch my channel, the term undervalued. I still think this book is undervalued for a Bronze Age blue chip key. I do. I think the value of this book has been sitting lower than it should have for a while. But again, if you look at the state of the market and the economy right now, it doesn't mean there won't be any ebb and flow right now. It could be a good time to buy for a lot of books. But again, you turn the market into a buyer's market, eventually that's going to swing the pendulum, and the value is going to start increasing once again. But again, we haven't seen a dip. We have not seen a dip yet, at least in 8.5 grade. So if you would have invested in this book 10 years ago, it would have cost you roughly around $414. Right now, sitting at $3,359. If you sold it right now and got the rough average fair market value, you would have took home $2,945 in profit, which as a percentage is 711. So just amazing stuff, right? These books are just blowing us out, blowing me out of the water with just looking at what they've been doing over the last 10 years. All right, folks, we have one more book to look at, and then we're going to decide and answer the question, what is, as of right now, the best Bronze Age blue chip key to invest in? But before we do, folks, I want to take less than 60 seconds to pause and think and talk a little bit about today's sponsor, PopCultureZone.com. PopCultureZone.com is an online shop focusing on hot new comics, including exclusive and incentive variants, CGC graded comics, and tons of other inventory, including pop culture toys and other collectibles, all at low and competitive prices. PopCultureZone.com ships all over the US, and if you are buying raw comics, they offer flat rate shipping of only $4.99. That's right, $4.99. Absolute craziness, right? And there's no taxes included, excluding New Jersey. Pop Culture Zone is also on eBay, where they hold a 100% positive feedback rating with over 8,000 completed transactions for this year alone. Make sure to check out the link to their website below, as well as their eBay link, so be sure to give them a follow there as well. All right, folks, one more book. And if we're talking about Bronze Age Marvel books, what can it be? None other than, of course, Hulk 181, the first full appearance of Wolverine, the first amazing cover appearance of Wolverine. One of the most iconic books of all time, especially for its era. Let's look at what this book was doing. 2021. High CGC 9.8 sell hit 49,200 back in March of 2021. A high raw sold in March of 2020 as well for 10,130. What's happened since? Well, look at this, folks. Recession who? Hulk 181. No, it didn't hit a high back in the summer of 2021. It hit a high in the spring of 2022. Already when, a little bit of the feelings of the market were coming about. $94,000 for a CGC 9.8 in April 22. Again, that's basically double. It's about 99 point something, 99 point something percent increase. What do I always say though, folks? Don't get caught up on outliers. But look at this. High raw sale of 6,000 in March of 2022 as well. And again, that's not the highest raw. I just use that as kind of an indicator to show you how don't always look at outliers, because look, the high raw that's still out there is that 10,130. But as of this year, the highest one has hit 6,000. But let's bring that into context. What can that mean? Well, it can mean that maybe for the raw books that have hit the market over the last few months, there hasn't been a pristine high grade raw for sale. So you got to take that with a grain of salt when looking at raw books, because you can't just say they're treated equally. Well, this book is dipping because it's $4,000 less. Well, this could have been a 9.8 candidate raw book that sold for 10,000. This one could have been maybe a high grade, but maybe it had a couple of spine ticks or something. You don't know, and I wanted to point that out. But let's look at the charts, folks. All right. We saw in 8.5, we definitely saw some, we're going into 2021. We're seeing some peaks. But look, we saw a peak towards, this is about towards the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. So kind of following a similar trend. Actually, what is that? Yep, that's January right here. January 8th, 2022, you saw the a high sale over $9,000 for a CGC 8.5. The last couple of sales have dipped off a little bit above 8,000, but still seems to be remaining pretty healthy, right? This book saw in 2014, its average fair market value was a bit lower than 2013, but ever since then, it's increased in value. 2020, kind of about the same, not even a 1%. Look at this. You gotta, again, 2021 is the highest, but this, out of these 2 years here, this book has seen a lot of high rate of return. So it's not as a high of an outlier compared to some of the other books. But look at this. Even in 2022, this book has been booming. I saw somebody commenting in one of my videos the other day saying they're worried about Hulk 181 because there's so many of them out there. And I think, if you're watching, whoever made that comment, this is saying something. I do believe if we look back at all the charts, Hulk 181 has had the highest rate of return for over the last year than any of these other books. Even Moon Knight's first appearance, when we had all that movie hype, if I can remember the data correctly. I think that goes to show that even with a dip in the market or a downturn in the market, this book's doing solid things still. We look at the trajectory. Fair market value right now for this 8.5, roughly sitting at about 8,741. If you look at the trajectory into 2029, man, that's over. That you're looking at about what, 22,000. Again, is that a bit of a stretch? I think it's a bit of a stretch, and again, we don't know what's happening right now with this economy. This economy is a variable and a factor that I think a lot of people didn't take into consideration that could happen. But if we're looking at where we're at right now, 10 years ago, $984 for this book in an 8.5. 8.7 now. That's $7,757 if you'd sold it for fair market value right now, roughly of a return on investment with a return on investment percentage of 788%. All right. This is what we're going to do, folks. We're going to gauge these numbers. Last year, we're going to use 4 indicators, okay? 4 data points to say which book wins. And this was last year's. Werewolf by Night won. And let me explain. Hulk 181 last year had the highest profit in dollar amount. Meaning, if you look at, in 2020, fair market value for this book was sitting at around $4,000. I'm just throwing this out there, rough estimate. But in 2021, fair market value was close to $8,000. That's $4,000, right? Next to the other books that aren't that valuable dollar-wise. Remember, Hulk 181 has the highest dollar value out of all these books. So that's why Hulk 181 won out. But now, ROI in terms of percentage, that's profit margin in terms of percentage. Werewolf by Night won. Meaning that even though it's a smaller dollar amount, it increased by a higher percentage than Hulk 181 did. Now, highest average rate of return, if we consider all the years, what did I think I computed 8 years. Out of the last 8 years, on average, Werewolf by Night had the highest rate of return, meaning on average, Werewolf by Night was increasing at higher percentages every year than any of the other books. Lowest volatility was Werewolf by Night 32 as well. What does that mean? Well, it means that Werewolf by Night never had a negative in return, a rate of return. Werewolf by Night was the only book to not have a year in the negative where its fair market value was lower than it was the year before. So that proves less volatile. That's why Werewolf by Night won last year. All right. Who is this year's winner? Folks, it is still Werewolf by Night 32, but comes with the asterisk. But let's just look at the numbers. Things have changed slightly. Total profit in dollar amount was still Hulk 181. Total ROI in terms of percentage was still Werewolf by Night, but highest ROR average, Giant Size X-Men #1, because it had such a good year over this last year, but it pretty much tied Werewolf by Night. Giant Size X-Men #1 was like 35.2, where Werewolf by Night was 34.8. Very, very similar, but obviously, Giant Size X-Men takes the cake. Lowest volatility still, though, was Werewolf by Night 32, so you could still argue that Werewolf by Night, if invested, though, here's the asterisk. This is all based on if you would have invested it in this book between 2012 and 2013. If you invested in these books between that time period, this would bring you the best rate of return in ROI, percentage-wise, back in your pocket. And you can even look at that. I give this theory a lot as well. Even though Hulk 181 is worth more, right? If you would have took the same dollar amount that Hulk 181 was worth 10 years ago, and say you could have bought 4 Werewolf by Night 32s for the same price as one Hulk 181, you would have came out with a larger profit today by investing in those 4 Werewolf by Night 32s than buying your one Hulk 181. But if you would have invested in the same books like 2 years ago, it may have not worked out the same. If you would have invested in 2 Werewolf by Nights in 2020, the end of 2020, and one Hulk 181, it may be different. That Hulk 181 may have been the best investment. So that's why the asterisk is there. And the asterisk is there for future value as well. Keep this in mind, folks. Werewolf by Night. We knew that Moon Knight was coming for a while, and that drove the market for this book. I do believe that moving forward into the next year, Werewolf by Night is going to be the most volatile out of all 4 of these books. I do. I think the trajectory is going to shift, and I think that this is when I'm going to do this video next year again. I'm calling it right now. I think Werewolf by Night 32 gets knocked off this list. I do. Now, is it still an extremely valid investment? Is it still a blue chip Bronze Age Marvel key? Absolutely. All of these books are, but I think the numbers are going to shift because we're moving on from the show. We got the X-Men coming, and I think that's why Hulk 181 has been doing so strong. I think that's why Giant Size X-Men is going to continue to do strong. We have John Bernthal, hopefully, fingers crossed, that he's going to come back in the MCU, just like they announced, Daredevil coming on Disney Plus with Charlie Cox. I really hope that happens. There's a lot more there that can happen with these other books. We saw Moon Knight. I don't think Moon Knight's done in the MCU. I think if they do that, it would be just a disservice to Oscar Isaac and the character alone. So, there could be rejuvenated interest in this character once we see him again. But I think we're going to have a break. I think we're going to have a year's break at least from seeing this character. All right. So look for the market to shift. If you ask the question, should I buy or sell? I can't tell you guys ever what to buy, right? Or what to sell. That's going to be you guys have to look at the data and ask yourself what's important to you. And it all depends on what you're looking to get out of these books. For a long hold, I wouldn't sell any of these books because I think these books are going to have an upward trajectory, even with some maybe ebb and flow over the next year, simply because of the economy. Simply because some people are paying $7 to $9 a gallon of gas. They're not going to be buying as many comic books. But overall, I think these books are long-term holds. If you have a couple of these and you bought them on the low and you bought them 6, 7, 8 years ago, hey, it's not a bad time to sell because you're going to make a huge profit. But the market's down. It could continue to go down on some of these books. I don't think by that much. Blue chip keys are here to stay. So, guys, that's the video today. Let me know what you guys think. And let me know what you think of the perspective. Again, these books are only picked based on data looking at these sales over the last 8 to 10 years. So let me know what you guys are in the market for. Are you guys hunting down any of these books right now? Are you guys looking to sell any of these books right now? And if you own them, are you holding long term? But before we go, I got to give a big shout out to all of my channel members. First, my Patreon members. Thank you guys so much for another month of continued support. We are going to be having another Patreon giveaway this month. Trev, the Shipping Guru, John, Rowe, Nexus Cowboy, Verified, Kyle, Justin, Jordan, X11, Shelby, Rich, Tony T, Larry, Michael, Alvin, Fletch, Pedro, Peter, Joe, Sagi, Dan, and Simon. Thank you all so very much. And to my YouTube channel members, we will be having a giveaway this month as well for you guys. Again, big shout out to the support again this month. The Card Bay, Jimmy G, Remy Q, C Axe, Louis Logics, Doug, Frisbee, Shadow Rat, Christopher, Pickle Ric Flair, Jack B, Comic Book Poser, Mikey, Goonish Lurker, Brandon H, Nexus Cowboy, Lisa, That Mountain Air, Buddy, Josh, Ariel, Red, Matt Labno, Battle, 66 Delta, Comic Journey, X11, Gordon Sisk, Joshua, E-Dub, Mick, Arthur, Sean, Simon, Comic Ozzy, Kaya B, Ghost, Junk, Prime Time, Rupert, Luis, Tony, and Chris. Oh, thank you all so much. Be well. Thank you all for watching. And hey, one last thing to all the fathers out there. Happy Father's Day to you all. I appreciate you all. We appreciate you all. Thank you guys. Be well. And until next time.